If Constantine didn't invent the Trinity, then who did? That's kind of like asking who invented atoms, or who invented water or H2O, or who invented God? Just as no one invented atoms, water, or H2O, and just as no one invented God, no one invented the Trinity either. But what do atoms and water have to do with God? Why compare these created things with the uncreated God? Stay tuned and you'll see. In one sense, there is an infinitely vast set of differences between atoms and water on the one hand, and God on the other hand. Atoms and water are physical things, created things. God, on the other hand, is an uncreated, eternally self-existing spiritual being. But let's consider how our understanding of God and how our understanding of these created things has developed over time. Then we find a helpful analogy to use in answering the question, who invented the Trinity? Let's start with atoms. From the shirt I'm wearing and the camera that's recording this footage to the air you and I are breathing right now, these wee little particles are the building blocks of all the physical stuff that exists in the world. They have been ever since God created the world, and atoms have not changed in the thousands of years since God created them. But what has changed is our understanding of atoms. From the 5th century BC to the 19th century AD, leading philosophers and scientists, ranging from the Greek philosopher Democritus to the English scientist John Dalton, they have long thought that the atom itself is the smallest thing in existence. It was considered an indivisible sphere. That's what the word atom means. It comes from the Greek word atomos, meaning uncuttable or indivisible. But in 1897, J.J. Thomson discovered atoms contain small negatively charged particles called electrons. As science advanced, Ernest Rutherford learned that the center of the atom consists of a small, positively charged nucleus. Niels Bohr then realized that electrons revolve around the nucleus in a set orbit. And James Chadwick discovered that the core of the atom was a nucleus that consisted of neutral particles called neutrons and positively charged particles called protons. What a long way we've come in our understanding. Today we know that an atom is not an indivisible sphere, but that the atom itself is made up of many much smaller components. And we do not ask who invented atoms or the various models of it. Atoms are created things, the most basic of all created things. And the models that have been proposed over time demonstrate not that atoms have changed, but that there has been a great deal of development in our understanding of the atom. We can also consider that liquid substance which covers more than 70% of planet Earth's surface, or which constitutes up to 70% of the human body's weight. Whether you go way back in time when people drank from their hands, or forward in time when it flows from a faucet or pitcher into a glass, water has always been water. From Moses' day to Muhammad's day and still today, it's this same substance that keeps us alive and hydrated. But as science and technology have advanced, we have developed a deeper understanding of what water is. Advances in our knowledge about the atom have given us deeper insights into the molecular structure of water. We now know that this life-sustaining substance is made up of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. So today, if we speak of H2O, everyone knows we're talking about this same old but ever-refreshing and life-sustaining liquid, water. No one invented H2O. And the fact that we can refer to water as H2O and have people understand what we're talking about is evidence of how much deeper our understanding of water is now than it was in the pre-scientific era. It's similar with the doctrine of the Trinity. God has always been God. Right from Genesis 1, where we read, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," to the end of time and the beginning of eternity, when the dwelling of God will again be with man, God has been the same unchanging God. However, over time, God has progressively revealed more and more of himself to us. And as we reflect on God's self-revelation, our own understanding of who God is broadens and deepens. And then, just as we develop terminology to describe the parts of an atom or the molecular structure of water as we discover more and more details about them, so also we acquire and develop terminology to describe our growing understanding of who God is. God gives us titles such as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in the Holy Bible. And we develop terms like Trinity, persons, and essence. You might wonder, why is the term Trinity so important to Christians when you don't even find it in the Bible? But there are good answers. First of all, it allows for theological precision, and it enables us to differentiate truth from falsehood. In addition, it provides a helpful theological shorthand for core Christian doctrines that are very complex. You could say a term like Trinity is a handle that allows us to easily grab hold of a core truth of the Christian faith. And without it, talking about the being of God would become very cumbersome and unwieldy because we would have to use so many words. At each stage in history, God's people have always known precisely as much about God as God wanted them to know. And that's as much as people needed to know at a given point. However, as God reveals more and more of himself over time, and as we have an expanded knowledge of who he is, we must embrace this growing and deepening understanding. Going back to atoms, think about it this way. Prior to the 18th century, we did not require students to know or believe that an atom is composed of protons, neutrons, and electrons. Nor did we expect people to know that water is composed of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. That's because at that stage in the history of science and technology, our knowledge had not yet progressed to the point of knowing atomic and molecular structure. However, today, we require students to know these details, and anyone who denies them is not taken seriously. In a similar way, prior to the appearance of the second person of the Trinity in the Incarnation and the descent of the third person of the Trinity at Pentecost, we were not at the points in history of God's self-revelation where we could know as clearly as we do today that the one God exists eternally in 3 divine persons. However, now that God has clearly revealed himself in the person of the Son when he was born of the Virgin Mary, and in the person of the Spirit on the day of Pentecost, we must believe that God is tripersonal. As R.C. Sproul says, the concept of the Trinity has emerged as a touchstone of truth, a non-negotiable of Christian orthodoxy. Anyone who denies God is triune is not a true Christian. In summary, God has not changed. The Trinity is not an invention either. If the Trinity were an invention, then it would be describing a God made by man. And we have a special word reserved for man-made gods, namely idol. No, instead, our understanding of God has developed over time. And this is not because we have made up new ideas about who God is or because of advances in our theological technology. Rather, our understanding of who God is has deepened because of advances in God's self-revelation to us. As history progressed, God progressively revealed more and more of who he is to us. And as we reflect on his self-revelation, our understanding of who God is has deepened and broadened. Just as successive advances in science and technology enable us to develop a deeper understanding of the atom and water, So in a similar way, advances in God's self-revelation, combined with our reflection on His progressive self-revelation, allow us to gain a fuller understanding of who God is. The doctrine of the Trinity is a fruit of the twofold activity of our reflection on God's progressive self-revelation.